The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Shortly after the non-indictment of Ferguson, Missouri police officer Darren Wilson, he was interviewed on ABC by George Stephanopoulos, and reports now indicate that ABC offered Officer Darren Wilson what is being described as a mid to high six-figure payment. So to me, mid six figures is around $500,000. High six figures could be, up to and around $900,000. The idea, Lewis, that Officer Darren Wilson, after not being indicted for killing unarmed teenager Michael Brown, was rewarded effectively with $500,000 to $1 million is truly a sickening reality.
Well, this is a game that the media plays. I guess you have a cop here who had to resign, who I guess might have a bounty on his head, and who, I don't know, might not be able to get a normal job after this. But so I think if I were in his position, I would be asking for the same amount of money for doing such an interview.
I'm not blaming him. And in fact, it appears that it wasn't even that he was asking for this amount of money. It seems that there was a bidding war between, at minimum, NBC and ABC, and the ante kept being upped. And eventually you got to this mid to high six-figure payment. And what's amazing to me is that much of what was said in the interview is just exactly what was said during the grand jury testimony. And George Stephanopoulos did not do any reasonable job of asking seriously difficult questions. And it's not because there weren't difficult questions to ask. As I told you about yesterday, legal analyst Lisa Bloom outlined on her Twitter account very specific questions that would have been, as she called it, a prosecutor's dream, which were not asked during the grand jury investigation, and they were not asked by George Stephanopoulos, and the whole thing really is angering, Lewis, because I know, and you may know, that there's this law which prevents criminals from profiting around the crime they have committed. So someone who is convicted of murder can't then make money writing a book about the murder that they were found guilty of. Now, of course, here there was not even an indictment, never mind a conviction. So there is nothing whatsoever that prevents Darren Wilson from profiting very handsomely from the fact that he shot and killed an unarmed black teenager. If he had been an officer, just think about the perversion of the status quo in this country, Lewis, around corporate media, around police shootings, around all this stuff. If an officer had saved the life of an unarmed black teenager from the bullets of someone else, would they be getting paid $500,000 by a TV network? Would they be getting paid $50,000 by a TV network for an interview? I think we all know the answer to that.
Yeah, I think the only person they could save and still make $500,000 would be the president or something like that.
Exactly right. And it's just amazing to me that this is the reaction to Darren Wilson. And there are people, Lewis, who are seeing Darren Wilson as some kind of hero, that he did something heroic. And that to me is, it's just a cesspool of bottom feeders, because even if you believe that legally speaking, Darren Wilson did not commit a crime, to see him as some kind of hero crusader for what I don't know is just so low.
People put him up on a pedestal. I don't know. Maybe martyr is the word, or I don't know. But at the very best, he just did his job. So is he worthy of praise? I don't know.
And if the reality is that doing his job requires the shooting of unarmed black teenagers, then that really should trigger a broader conversation about the sad state of affairs of this country right now. On Sunday, the St. Louis Rams NFL football team, as they were coming out onto the field, 5 of their players came out onto the field kind of before the rest of the team, and they did the hands up, don't shoot gesture. Now, initially a reference to Michael Brown and the Ferguson, Missouri shooting by Officer Darren Wilson, and more broadly being applied now to the problem with black young men who are being disproportionately shot and killed by police. And it does not seem at all that the St. Louis Police Department like this whatsoever. They have now said that the St. Louis Police Officers Association is profoundly disappointed with the members of the St. Louis Rams football team who chose to ignore the mountains of evidence released from the St. Louis County grand jury this week and engage in a display that police officers around the nation found tasteless, offensive, and inflammatory. First and foremost, the idea that they are speaking for police officers around the nation is ridiculous. I personally spoke to law enforcement officials who said, oh, I don't agree with that statement at all. I happen to agree with the St. Louis Rams. I happen to agree with the obvious absurdities of how this grand jury was carried out. So offensive to me, Lewis, is that the St. Louis Police Officers Association pretends to speak for every officer in this country.
Right. I'll say that I guess this seemed to work because they won 52-0. But apart from that, this is a strange thing to do because you kind of have to represent the community in a way when you're an NFL player living in a place like this, and you're an icon. And so, aren't you also representing the police department? I mean, they're kind of, I understand the statement, but they're throwing every police officer into that same category as well.
I'm not sure I know what you're saying. Who's throwing police officers into which category?
The football team seems to be throwing all police officers into the same category when they're making a statement like this, saying, hands up, don't shoot.
See, I
these cops
disagree
are out
with you.
to get everybody.
I disagree with you. I think that what they're saying by hands up, don't shoot is we have a problem in this country as far as police being less cautious when it comes to using lethal force against black young men who often end up being unarmed. I don't see it whatsoever as an attack on a specific police officer. It's a social commentary that they are, of course, within their rights to make. But for me, Lewis, the issue is, what is the team going to do? Because the St. Louis Police Officers Association has wanted an apology and they want the team punished. And Kevin Demoff, the executive VP of operations for the St. Louis Rams, told the AP that he, quote, expressed regret for any perceived disrespect of law enforcement. And Police Chief John Belmar of St. Louis says that during the call, Kevin Demoff actually apologized on behalf of the team. But when they went back to Demoff, reporters went back to Demoff, Demoff said there was no apology. There was absolutely no apology here. So there seems to even be confusion, Lewis, as to whether an apology took place.
Strange. I don't know. Do I think that there will be some public statement by the team? I don't know. I'm sure there will be questions during, post-game interviews and conferences.
Well, the statement the team made is that they support the First Amendment rights of their players, which is absolutely the right statement.
Right. It's still, I could still see them getting yelled at because they probably didn't run this by the coach and the general manager.
They could certainly get yelled at and said, hey, guys, we don't really want this kind of attention here. But I could definitely see that happening. But hey, this is what the players believe, and they have a venue here that they've worked very hard to achieve. They have worked their whole lives to make it to the NFL. And I'm not going to fault them from expressing their views. Their views may be unpopular. If their views are really that unpopular, people could stop going to the Rams games. But I am not going to say that they should not have been allowed to express those views. That would be absurd. The NRA often likes to say that more guns equals less crime. Unfortunately, yet another study tells us that is not the case. Researchers at Stanford have concluded that contrary to the commonplace statement that right to carry laws and concealed carry laws decrease violent crime, such laws correlate with an increased number of violent crimes since 1999 in states that have passed these laws. Law professor John Donahue III said, quote, trying to estimate the impact of right to carry laws has been a vexing task over the last 2 decades, in large part because the most frequently cited study, which is one called More Guns, Less Crime from 1997, ended right before the extraordinary crime drop of the 1990s. Donahue and his assistants, Stanford law student Abe Aneja and John Hopkins doctoral student Alexandria Zhang, contend that a more accurate estimate of the effect of right to carry laws on violent crime would look at data from 1999 to 2010, because that period includes the increases and then declines associated with the rise and fall of the crack epidemic. So to summarize this, those who point to the 1997 study, which says more guns decrease violent crime, ignore a reality of the last 15 years in this country that has seen a general decrease in crime and several other states that have added right to carry laws. So it's not really fair to base your assessment on the impact of gun availability on crime if you're looking at data, Lewis, that stopped in 1997.
That's true. There's lots of interesting data around this. And, I like to compare this country to other countries in a lot of ways. And, there are a lot of countries where there are a lot of guns and almost no crime. And some people use the argument that wouldn't work in America for a lot of things. But I think you have to look at different countries differently just because of how they are socially, and this is one of those instances.
Indeed, and when we look at the data from 1999 to 2010, it is the exact opposite of what the NRA and gun fetishists want you to think. Quote, the totality of the evidence based on educated judgments about the best statistical models suggest that right to carry laws are associated with substantially higher rates of murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. The strongest evidence was for aggravated assault, which increased by almost 8%, but homicides also increased in the 8 states that adopted right to carry laws between 1999 and 2010, a time during which the overall crime rate decreased. Now, I would actually be open to the idea that there is no causal relationship here between more guns and more crime, but what we have to throw out at this point is the 1997 data that implies more guns decrease crime. There are many confounding factors here, Lewis, and we need even more data, but the refrain from the NRA that more guns decrease crime is definitely one we can throw out the window.
Not just this one study. I think most evidence we have points to more guns being equal to more crime across the country, generally speaking.
Let's, as a minimum, enact stricter gun safety background check legislation. That's just a minimum. There's no reason not to do that, given the 8 in 10 or even higher support that would have, that has in polling of the entire American population, a representative sample, of course. President Obama has resisted calls to cancel or curtail federal programs that continue giving billions of dollars to local police departments so they can continue to militarize. We've talked about the hyper-militarized trend among local police departments, the overuse and increased use of SWAT teams, etc. And President Obama is, for the time being, not going to curtail the funding that allows police departments to militarize in this way. But what he is including as part of a new package here is $263 million over 3 years to reform police departments, which would include around 50,000 new lapel-mounted cameras that officers would wear. This is something that would be a really, really good thing. Civil rights leaders activating around the Michael Brown shooting have said if only these officers were wearing cameras all the time, we might have much more precise and accurate data around what happened. Now, we know what the problem is, Lewis, that oftentimes in key moments, the camera malfunctioned or the video was deleted, but still more cameras is better.
Yeah, there's going to be things that go wrong with them. There's going to be times when officers would turn them off or remove them or get rid of them. But overall, I think it'd be pretty hard to say that this won't make things better.
In every place, in every jurisdiction where cameras have been tested, we have seen a decrease in the number of use of force complaints and a decrease in the overall number of complaints against police officers. This is a good thing. I just think it needs to be funded to a far greater degree than just 50,000 lapel cameras, but it's a start, and we'll see what happens. And also, Lewis, the video should be immediately stored somewhere on the cloud to at least try to prevent these coincidental deletions of video that take place.
I could easily see that transfer being made between the camera and some hard drive on the officer's car or something like that. I'm sure it can be done.
Follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/dpacman. We have a fantastic program for you today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com is your best source for unbiased news because conservatives know that you reduce the abortion rate by keeping birth control away from women while teaching abstinence-only sex education. If that sounds unbiased to you, liberalbias.com is the website for you. Today's new member of the day is Matthew Kilborn. Matthew Kilborn, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. And remember that for a few more days, you can get a free 2015 Patriot Mail calendar with your yearly membership only at davidpakman.com/calendar15. We often hear from the right that President Obama is too non-religious, kind of like a communistic atheist. We often hear from the right that President Obama and the left can't possibly be moral without religion because they don't look at the Bible enough. And in his recent speech about immigration, President Obama actually quoted scripture. And of course, the right is still not happy because President Obama now is being accused of misusing the Bible quote that he talked about during his immigration speech. He said, "Scripture tells us that we shall not oppress a stranger, for we know the heart of a stranger. We were strangers once too. My fellow Americans, we are and always will be a nation of immigrants. We were strangers once too." And on Fox and Friends, what happened? Well, Tucker Carlson and Elizabeth Hasselbeck and the whole crew criticized President Obama for using scripture for political gain. I know it's hard to imagine that, but this is what they said.
The United States last night in the cross hall at the White House, invoking scriptures, which I believe had to do with feeding the poor and the hungry, and nothing about visas.
Here's the Bible scholar in chief lecturing us, telling us that it is not kicking people out of your country who've come here illegal is tantamount to, quote, oppressing them, and God is opposed to that. And God, by the way, is on President Obama's side.
But this is a man who, claims to have been in church for a long time. Did he just read that verse in Scripture and decide to use it right now? We wonder. Charles Krauthammer says, I'm wondering about that. This is the audacity of nope.
I've got to say, we can have a political debate, but for this guy specifically, the president who spent his career defending late-term abortion, among other things, lecturing us on Christian faith, that's too much. I mean, that is too much. We always heard the Christian right, the Christian right. This is the Christian left at work, and it's repugnant.
How many times over the last 6 years, 8 years, have we heard this president, then senator, badmouth George W. Bush? A million times.
Right.
Last night he actually quoted him in a positive way, which I think was the first time.
Whatever
I've
it
ever heard
takes,
that.
I guess that's the point. Whatever.
Pulling out all this stuff.
But not communicated with him, as we heard from George W. Bush.
But to quote scripture?
President.
That is totally out of... I mean, that's just...
Wait. Is the allegation here that somebody in politics used a piece of scripture out of context to prop up their personal beliefs or help their political cause? I'm shocked, Lewis.
Yeah, and I believe the term used was repugnant.
Yeah.
This is happening every day in every state and every city and town across the country. But of course, if it's President Obama, it's terrible. And you know what? I'm kind of glad he misquoted the Bible or misread it. Because,
I don't think he did. That's the funny thing. I mean, yes, he's using a piece of the Bible to talk about immigration, and you could argue that that's not really meant to be about immigration, but who really knows?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like much of the Bible, it's completely open to interpretation.
I guess the good thing about this is they're admitting President Obama is a Christian if they're saying he's part of the Christian left, which is not always a foregone conclusion on Fox News.
No. I guess this time he's not a Muslim or, an alien or whatever else he might be.
Christian historian David Barton, and I use the term historian very loosely, has formerly said on the program that San Antonio has criminalized Christianity, that the Bible is part of the Constitution because of the Seventh Amendment, that if you have elections, no matter how corrupt, you can't have theocracy. He also said that the Bible will get rid of PTSD if soldiers are truly God's warriors. And he also said people are on welfare merely because they don't read the Bible enough. He is now reminiscing on video, you're going to love this, about the days when churches would have approval rights over movies. If the church didn't like a movie, it wouldn't be released. And he also says, I've heard about using the Bible to reduce the debt. We heard that recently from a newly elected Republican. But David Barton says, we need to use the Bible for computer programming. Listen to this.
Which is why we get the right to confront our accusers in the Sixth Amendment. We took that right from Jesus. I mean, if you're going to do everything Jesus said, then we've got to get into economics, we've got to get into employee-employee relationships, we've got to get into contracts. He covered all of that. And so if you don't get God back into business, back into media, and by the way, in the 1960s, you could not bring a movie out unless the church approved it. The church said on the editorial boards in the 1960s, and we said, oh, we shouldn't be involved in secular stuff. Guess what? We've given all that over. See, until we get back into saying, you know, I've got to have a biblical view on computer programming. I've got to have a biblical view as a business, a chamber of commerce. I'm a leader in chamber, whatever it is. If we don't get that back to where that everyone's got a common worldview, and, you know.
Does anyone realize the authoritarian, fascist insanity that this system that David Barton wants to see implies? We need a common worldview where all laws and areas of life are based on the Christian Bible. No matter what your religion is, no matter what your lack of religion might be, you must live by the arbitrary Christian doctrine in your day-to-day life, even, Lewis, if you are programming computers.
And I'm not sure how that translates.
No.
Maybe we'd have to ask a computer programmer. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. But this is Christian Sharia law, is it not?
When can we finally get a biblical view on healthcare and get single-payer healthcare? Because that's clearly what Jesus would have wanted. That's the one, Lewis, that, we need to kind of reinterpret whether we want a biblical view on healthcare. There, the for-profit vulture capitalist system is okay.
Actually, did you know that Jesus was the CEO of a health insurance company? Most people don't know that.
He was the CEO of Adam and Eve Mutual Insurance Company, apparently. This is sickening, and the most sickening part is there's a non-zero percentage of the population in this country that sees a guy like David Barton as one of the good guys.
Yeah, clearly not one of the good guys. I think I'm glad that most Christians see this guy as radical.
Yeah, no question about that. We will take a break. Next, I will be joined by a former Scientologist of 30 years who is not being allowed to see her children by the Church of Scientology. That's next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Lori Hodgson, a former Scientologist of 30 years with quite an incredible story to tell us. And I think, Lori, the best place to start is at the very beginning. You became a Scientologist at age 13. How did that happen?
My mom actually joined Scientology and found it was helping her and saw that I was having a hard time with communication. I was very shy after my parents' divorce, and my mom brought me down to do a communication course.
So you were essentially a second-generation Scientologist, as the case may be.
Yes.
And when you first got involved in Scientology, you went into this, talk to us about that. You were brought in to learn how to better communicate with people?
Yeah, that was the first course that I took. And then from there, I took more courses. And when I was 15, I signed a part-time staff contract for 5 years that I did after school.
So I want to get to that staff contract in a second, but I'm curious before we get to that, when we talk about somebody who is, for example, raised Christian, oftentimes they recount how their family would casually or not so casually talk about some of the beliefs that go along with being Christian. Oh, well, there's this thing called hell, or there was Noah's Ark, etc. As a Scientologist, did your mom kind of casually talk to you about, oh, these are the beliefs and this is the sacred text that we believe? Or was that kind of secondary to what the specifics of these communication courses were, for example?
That was secondary. Your beliefs, like with God, is up to the individual. It's more the self-help. And so what they have you do is you fill out a personality test before you go and start courses in Scientology, and they find your weaknesses. And then they try to say this class will help you. And my weakness was being able to communicate with others.
So all of the stuff about Xenu and the aliens and all of these different things, even though these things are part of Scientology, they were not front and center, at least in the conversations you and your mom would have.
Not at all. In fact, I was never told or knew anything about the Xenu because I didn't do the upper levels of Scientology.
Interesting. So at least your experience was that at the lower levels of Scientology, the religious doctrine per se, and it's weird to even call it that, but we'll call it that at least in this conversation, it wasn't even really present for you.
No, not at all. In fact, you could just, I was baptized Lutheran, and so I was told I could believe in God and whatever I wanted, but as time went by, I would hear people saying, no, there isn't a God. So I really I was kind of lost after I joined Scientology and what to believe.
So you're 15, you get one of these staff contracts. And we talked a little bit about this with Mark Rathbun when we had him on the show. And I'd love to go into more detail about this with you. You get a staff contract. So now are you an employee of Scientology, or how does that work?
Yes. And I got paid back then about $10 a week. And I worked probably, part-time, 30 to 40 hours. And I signed a 5-year contract. If I broke that contract, I would have to pay Scientology back for any of the services I received as a staff member.
And of course, the services you received are, I'm sure, valued at these absurd retail prices that are completely arbitrary, right?
Oh, yes, they're very high. Counseling, Scientology counseling is very expensive. It's in the thousands.
So you become a staffer at Scientology, at the Church of Scientology. What do you do? What's your day-to-day?
Back then, I graded tests. I did more administration type things, and that's about it. I actually had my own hours, so I could go in after everybody left, because at the time I was on staff, I got recruited to join the Sea organization and to leave my family. And I just had a good sense that not to do that. And so I tried to avoid having that possibility of being recruited again. So I would do my position in Scientology after hours. I got smart.
And talk to us about the Sea organization. What does that mean to be recruited to join?
It's where you sign a contract that you dedicate your life for 1 million years to work for Scientology. You live on the base in Clearwater, Florida, or in Los Angeles, and basically you work for Scientology. I've heard you don't get to see your family at that time, and I didn't know about the pay, but that you're told that you get all your Scientology services for free, and that you're saving the world, that, it's your duty to do this. And they put a lot of pressure on recruiting you to do this. And if you don't, you're actually made, to feel really bad that you did the wrong decision.
So we'll keep going sequentially with this. At what point how old were you when you had children?
I was 30 and 33.
Okay. And at that point, you were still a Scientologist?
Yes, after my staff contract that I did fulfill at age 20, I decided to go back to school. And I knew things weren't right with Scientology. I was seeing some things I didn't think were correct, and I wanted to get away from it. So I moved away to Chico State and got away for 5 years. Unfortunately, my good friend introduced me to my ex-husband, Jim Leake, and he was a Scientologist, and I got back involved doing Scientology again.
So you're with a Scientologist, you have children, and now you're raising what are, practically speaking, third-generation Scientologists, right?
Yes.
And what was your children's involvement with the Church of Scientology while you were still in the church?
My ex-husband wanted our children to go to a Scientology school, and so I decided to get a job there, and I was the director of the preschool, which was the non-Scientology part of the school. And my kids started in the preschool and worked their way up until we got divorced. And then I took them out and put them in public school.
Now, when that happened, walk us through what were the early stages of the disconnection that has now taken place between you and your children. How long were they in regular public schools? Did they stay in public school?
Shortly after the divorce, I couldn't afford the Scientology school, and I wanted them to be well-rounded and to be able to be with other children that were not just Scientologists. And so I got them both back in public school. They were doing well. My daughter at 15 was in ninth grade, and she got recruited behind my back, like I got recruited to join the Sea organization or to join staff.
Now, talk about what does it mean behind your back? Was this through her father, who presumably was still a Scientologist, or did someone approach her from the Sea organization directly?
Yes, her father was an active Scientologist. I was a Scientologist, but not as active as he was. I put my family first, so we did a lot of family things. But he took my daughter down to the organization. And this is a girl who was getting straight A's, who wanted to go to college to be a veterinarian, and went to Chico State and came home after 3 hours and said, "Mom, I want to drop out of school, get my GED, because my calling in this life is to work for Scientology." And so all her goals had vanished at that time, and she felt she needed to be on staff with Scientology and dedicate her life to working for them.
What was your reaction when she said this to you?
Oh, I absolutely said, no way, you're going to finish school, and then we'll talk about it. Absolutely not. Until you're 18, you can make that decision. I mean, I was firm. That was a nightmare, because for 6 months, I made her stay in her public school. At that point, before this happened, we were very close mother and daughter. And at the point that after she was recruited and I wouldn't let her just go get her GED, she basically started failing in school, and she hated me. I mean, I would not agree with the Scientology or her father to do this. And so basically they turned her against me. It was a nightmare. So we would have to go down to Scientology, and they would put me in counseling to find out why I wouldn't agree. And it was awful, David. It was like a lie detector. And basically they would ask me questions like, why, do you have bad thoughts about Scientology? I go, no, I just want my daughter to finish school. Do you have bad thoughts about David Miscavige? I said, no. So they kept asking me, is it your father that's against this? I go, no, it's me as her mother. This went on for months. They just tried to break me down, and I stayed firm. But then they put me in with a chaplain who handles family matters in Scientology. And I was in there with my daughter and my husband and the chaplain and myself. And basically we worked on an agreement that she would go back to her Scientology school and get her diploma. Little did I know, she went back and got her diploma in 3 months at 16 years old. So it wasn't a full accredited diploma. I let her join staff, and which was the 5-year contract like I did, but she broke hers after 6 months because she realized she wanted to be back in school, and she had a $10,000 debt.
Incredible. All right, let's pause right there. We've been speaking with Lori Hodgson, a former Scientologist of 30 years. We're going to take a pause on our radio and television program, and we will continue speaking with Lori. You will be able to find the full interview on our YouTube channel.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
A Houston, Texas woman was shot in the head by an off-duty police officer who went into a road-raging mania after she honked at him for cutting her off, according to KHOU. The victim, who has not been identified for fear of retaliation, said she was driving on the 610 loop when Kenneth Caplan cut her off. Quote, "He was about to hit me, so I switched to the other lane, got in front of him and cut him off. I guess that angered him because he pulled alongside her, rolled down his window and opened fire. He was aiming at me and I thought he was going to cuss me out. it didn't register that I was, going to get shot. I just started crying because I knew I was going to die. I wanted to call my mom and tell her I love you. Fortunately, the bullet only grazed her head. It still opened up a gaping wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. She said, I was like, oh my God, he just shot me. And I was applying pressure to my head because it wouldn't stop bleeding. She pulled over to the side of the road, called 911, and was taken to a hospital. Investigators wouldn't say what evidence eventually led them to identify this police officer Caplan as the shooter, but that they did. And they said Kenneth Caplan was not on duty at the time of the incident in which he was involved, nor was he displaying any article connecting him to the Harris County Constable's Office Precinct 6. The precinct neither condones nor tolerates the actions taken by Kenneth Caplan that connected him to the incident, and necessary measures were taken to collect his credentials and remove him from our status. Lewis, it seems justified to me. According to one witness, we can't find that witness, but according to one witness, the woman made a gun gesture with her hand at the guy. So, of course, it was reasonable to shoot him. She may have been armed.
Yeah, I don't know. Was that really a witness? Or are you just making that up?
I'm making that up. Of course not.
All right.
And we've heard more and more absurd justifications from on-duty police as to why they decided to use lethal force against someone. And that would be the type of thing I would expect. But this is nothing short of attempted murder, Lewis. And that's what Kenneth Caplan should be charged with.
Right. Perhaps not premeditated, but certainly. And I can't believe that this guy was carrying a gun around trying to protect, or quote, protect the people of Houston.
I wonder if the reaction from his police department would have been the same if this is something he had done while on duty. Woman cuts you off, you shoot her in the head. Hey, maybe it was justified. She may have been inadvertently impeding an investigation of some kind or something. My sense is we would not see the same reaction from the police department if Kenneth Caplan had been on duty at the time of this shooting.
Probably not. We know that just being in that uniform, it's night and day when the gun goes off.
A Republican Congressional aide named Elizabeth Lauten got into some hot water because she criticized the Obama daughters for their lack of class and dressing as if they were angling for a, quote, spot at a bar. It turns out that she was once arrested for larceny during her own, quote, awful teenage years, according to court records. In a November 27th Facebook post, Elizabeth Lauten criticized Sasha and Malia Obama because they looked bored during President Obama's pardoning of turkeys before Thanksgiving, because of how they were dressed, etc., etc. And it turns out, according to documents, that she also suffered from what would be characterized, arguably, as an equal lack of class when she was younger. It turns out that she was caught shoplifting in a mall, misdemeanor larceny, according to court records, when she was 17, stealing from a Belk department store in her North Carolina hometown. Lewis, if she is going to criticize Sasha and Malia Obama, which I think anyway should kind of be out of bounds, I think it was a completely classless criticism, she should also recognize that she herself would have been guilty of that same lack of class when she was 17. I don't know that she's too eager to talk about that, though.
Yeah, perhaps even more so. I mean, is looking bored during a turkey pardoning really that much of an offense? I think we have some hypocrisy here.
My question is, what grown, arguably professional, and I use that term, arguably professional woman, would have the time or desire to criticize teenage girls on her Facebook account? For me, aside from being offensive and misguided and a total distraction, I wouldn't want someone like this woman working on anything for me, because she seems so petty and childish that she would say, I'm going to now take time out of my day as a professional to post on my Facebook page about what two teenage girls were wearing.
Maybe that's her job. I don't know. Maybe she gets paid to do nonsense like this. There are people who do, unfortunately.
Do you think, Lewis, any criticism of the children of elected officials should be off limits before they're 18 years old?
Before they are 18, it would depend on the situation. Generally speaking, and when it comes to things like this, I would say yes. I don't see the point in making fun of kids when they're looking bored because their dad is giving a boring speech. I mean, come on here.
And how far would you take this? In other words, if the 17-year-old child of an elected official were to be accused of murder, would that still be completely off limits?
I don't think that would be off limits at all. That's what I mean. It would depend on the situation, and I think that one might be worth discussing.
All right. Lewis is banging the gavel on this one. We have heard from Lewis. Our voicemail number, 219-2DavidP. Here's an interesting voicemail we received relating to Lewis's birthday, I believe. Take a listen.
Hi, David. Hi, Lewis. It's Bill from Pennsylvania. I'm calling regarding the conversation about Lewis's birthday. You mentioned that when you turn 30, that you thought the next milestone was 40. And I don't know if this is already passed for you, but I think one of the milestones that you have as an adult is when you pass the age that you remember your parents being. For me, that was in my late 30s. Maybe that has already passed for you, but I don't know. So just a thought. Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye.
that's interesting. So when I was born, my parents were 31. So I guess reasonably speaking, I don't have clear memories of my parents when they were younger than 35, 34, 35-ish. So I'm not there yet. What I am almost at, my next birthday, 31, Lewis, will be the age that my parents were when they had me. And that is certainly a little bit, feeling a little bit odd. What about you? I mean, I'm guessing your parents are similar age to my parents. So I'm guessing you're in a similar thing. You're still a few years away from an age at which you remember your parents being.
Exactly. And so I'll have to consider this when I get to that point. But right now I'm thinking, no, I don't think I'll ever act like my parents acted. I think I'll always be a little more relaxed and a little more immature.
How old were
hopefully.
your parents when you were born?
I believe around the same age as yours.
Okay, so within a year or two, you'll be the age at which your parents decided we are now going to birth Louis Motamedi. How does that impact your thinking about you having children, accidentally or otherwise?
No impact whatsoever is the short answer.
All right. On today's bonus show, tied elections in Florida, an off switch for pain, and HBO hires 160 lawyers for the release of their Scientology film. We will talk about all of that and more. And don't forget, we have the 2015 Patriot Mail calendars. I have one here. One of the custom images in this calendar was created by producer Louis Motamedi. The other 12 images created by viewers of The David Pakman Show. You can get these calendars at davidpakman.com/calendar15. We are running out of time to get these to everybody, and they will not be on sale for much longer. Get a free calendar with a yearly membership too at davidpakman.com/calendar15.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.